Kilbride Area Committee on 12th September 2023. I've noticed we have Councillor Anderson, Councillor Archie Buchanan and Councillor Matthew Buchanan present. Councillor Convery? No. We have apologies from Councillor Cooper. I have Councillor Fagan and Councillor Ferguson present. Councillor Gladys Ferguson-Miller? No. Councillor Frame present. Apologies from Councillor Gray. Councillor Kerr? Thank you. I have Councillor MacDonald present. Apologies from Councillor McAdams. Also present, Councillor McDougall, Councillor Robb, Councillor Scott, Councillor Watson and Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, item 1 in the agenda, declaration of interest. Do we have any declaration of interest? No. Okay, thanks for that. Can we have a proposer and seconder for the minutes of the previous meeting? I'll propose. Matthew Buchanan. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, items for noting. Item 3 is cancelled today due to Michelle ill, so just score that one out. Item 4 is a local policing annual update. And we'll invite Chief Inspector Stephen McGovern and Inspector David Docherty to address the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Just move on to the first slide for us. Thank you. My name is Inspector David Docherty. I'm the Area Inspector for East Kilbride and Straven, and with me today is Chief Inspector Steve McGovern. He's the Area Commander for East Kilbride, Straven, Cambuslang and Rutherglen areas. Next slide for us. Thank you. The new local policing plan has recently been announced with its 3 main priorities. These are the priorities that we'll aim to deliver over the next 3 years. They include protecting our communities, safeguarding our citizens and enhancing our service. A large part of our daily business involves partnership working. Local officers continue to liaise with partners in the community and share information to detect and deter crime, as well as improve life in the local area. This can range from low-level vandalism where graffiti is identified and removed by South Lanarkshire Council environmental team, or higher-level multi-agency meetings with social work to have safety plans for vulnerable people put in place and ensure preventative actions taken against repeat offenders. Partnership also includes the Community Safety Hub weekly meetings, which are held. These are weekly meetings with local partners from housing, anti-social investigation teams, Scottish Fire and Rescue, which identify problematic tenants' hotspot locations for joint tasking to decrease antisocial behaviour within the area. We also have our school-based officers who work predominantly at Calder Glen High and Duncanrig. Although they're not solely at these schools, they will help out at St Andrews and Brides and also Calder Glen High School. Protecting our communities, youth disorder intervention. Community inputs for kids. Inputs were delivered by local community officers to various youth groups over the last 12 months. In particular, officers attended at Universal Connections in East Kilbride and spoke about antisocial behaviour, the dangers involved in gang culture, and how individuals' actions can affect others. These inputs were received and delivered to mainly age groups 12 to 15 and were well received. Working with South Lanarkshire Council anti-social investigation teams, the police are now able to refer problem families within the community for a joint partnership approach. Parents are being held accountable for their child's actions, even away from the family home. So far, there have been 5 families in East Kilbride who have received a joint approach in order to curb unacceptable behaviour. Unacceptable behaviour notices have been served on all 5 families. Other initiatives for kids in the area, the Move the Goalpost initiative, operated at various times of the year across East Kilbride. In particular, were based at Greenhills for 12 weeks running from mid-October through to early December. The activity was attended by youths in the local area and gave them a well-needed distraction from less social behaviour. Violent crime and antisocial behaviour. Purchase of quad bikes through the support of the Community Safety Partnership. With the assistance of the Community Safety Partnership, funding was received by community policing at East Kilbride and were able to purchase 2 quad bikes to tackle violent crime and antisocial behaviour. The bikes arrived in February and have been a great asset in policing hard-to-reach rural areas within the community. The quad spearheaded an Easter action plan which saw 37 young people being stopped and searched, 11 arrests were made and 8 others were issued with formal warnings. They also played a huge part in the summer action plan to tackle antisocial behaviour in the later nights during the school break. That initiative saw 35 people being stopped and searched, 7 arrested and 5 others giving formal warnings. There was also a large volume of alcohol seized, along with a number of offensive weapons. When it comes to safeguarding our citizens, the police delivered online safety inputs to several schools throughout East Kilbride and Straven. Nowadays, being online is an integral part of children and young people's lives. Guidance was delivered around social media, online gaming, websites and apps that can be easily accessed through mobile phones, computers, laptops and tablets, all of which form part of a children and young person's online world. These inputs were well received by both students and the teachers who took part. Targeting younger children, local community safety officers delivered further talks to many of the nursery schools in East Kilbride. These child awareness talks focused around people who can help us strategy. This is an important topic that teaches children to know who can help them when they have a problem. There are a number of people in children's lives and it's crucial they know who to go to in an emergency situation. This was done in a safe way and in a learning environment and was fun for the kids. Also, with underneath the safeguarding umbrella, local ward officers continue to target licensed premises who may be selling alcohol or other restricted items to those who are underage. The bottle marking scheme and proxy purchase initiatives have produced some good results over the last year, with a number of licensees being spoken to regarding bad practice and education delivered. Vaping stores have now also begun to feature and are now regularly visited by ward officers. Substance-induced harm. Our local community policing teams, along with our proactive units, continue to target drug users and those concerning the supply of controlled drugs within our communities. There have been a number of successful operations in the last 12 months, with a large quantity of drugs and cash being seized. This has caused significant disruption to organised crime within our local area. In October last year, a proactive unit arrested a male for drug dealing in East Kilbride. 69 bags of cocaine and over £16,000 of cash was seized. The individual involved was given a 6-month custodial sentence. In December last year, a male was stopped and searched in East Kilbride. He was found in possession of 37 bags of cocaine, 71 bags of cannabis, 25 ecstasy tablets, and 9 bags of MDMA. This year, a significant cannabis cultivation was discovered within an industrial unit in East Kilbride. Almost 400 plants with a potential street value of £200,000 were seized. 2 males were arrested and charged with drug offences. Our multi-agency day of action. In April this year, a local community policing team organised a multi-agency day of action targeting drug dealing and money laundering at a local car wash in East Kilbride. The agencies involved included Immigration, Trading Standards, Health and Safety Executive, HMRC and SEPA. A number of offences were identified both by Immigration and Health and Safety. 3 males were arrested and later bailed with regards to illegal employment as they were illegal immigrants. The business premises could have been fined up to £20,000 per employee. 1 female was arrested for illegal entry into the country and taken into custody before being taken to the Dingravo Immigration Centre for deportation. There were also several electrical safety issues identified by Health and Safety, and prohibition notices were served. The police themselves seized £18,000 in cash and also nearly £4,000 in euros from the premises. The owner of the premises was also charged with money laundering offences. These types of activities put a serious dent in local and organised crime within our local area. Acquisitive crime, prevention. Community officers from East Kilbride have delivered training sessions to Boots the Chemist and Superdrug, along with other smaller retailers in East Kilbride Town Centre. The purpose of this training was to raise awareness of crime prevention techniques around shoplifting and other retail crime. These inputs were all received well by staff and saw an almost immediate drop in the number of thefts being committed. At Christmas last year, the police applied for and received funding from the owners of the Kingsgate retail park in East Kilbride, a company called Satchel's Property Management. This funding was used to provide additional reassurance patrols in the retail park over the festive period. The police presence caused a significant decrease in the number of crimes reported over the Christmas holidays. Thefts of fuels continues to be a problem for the police. Fuel theft prevention booklets and posters have been delivered to several garages in East Kilbride and Straven. This is due to a noticeable increase in drive-offs, no doubt directly linked to the ongoing cost of living crisis. There is work ongoing to roll out the RAC, Retailers Against Crime computer system, to officers across Lanarkshire. This system is used nationally by retailers to identify and detect offenders, giving the police access will allow us to better identify those involved and also establish any crime trends and repeat offenders within our area. Further preventative measures, officers from the community safety team gave advice and guidance to residents who live in sheltered housing complexes across East Kilbride. These inputs focus mainly on bogus callers and what they can do to protect themselves from doorstep crime, helping to protect and safeguard some of the most vulnerable within our communities. Further acquisitive crime, proactive policing. What are we doing to proactively combat acquisitive crime? In December last year, a proactive unit arrested and charged a known housebreaker with eight break-ins that had occurred in the East Kilbride area alone. This man was found guilty at court and sentenced to a 6-month custodial sentence. Unfortunately, as time passes, he has now been released, but will continue to be targeted by our proactive teams. Community officers executed 2 search warrants for stolen property at addresses in Glasgow. This was after £900 worth of goods was stolen from a Nike shop at the Kingsgate Retail Park. 3 separate individuals were arrested and charged, with nearly £600 worth of that property being recovered. This caused a significant disruption to a known shoplifting crime gang who are operating in our area. Community policing also managed to identify the persons involved in the high-value theft from Morrison's in East Kilbride. Over £2,000 worth of goods was stolen. A male and female were identified from CCTV and have been arrested and charged with theft. Our proactive units investigated a number of fraud inquiries involving a bogus workman allegations. After a protracted inquiry across both Glasgow and Lanarkshire, a bogus company was identified. The company's owner was charged with 11 separate offences, totalling tens of thousands of pounds of fraudulent activity, most of which targeted against the most vulnerable within our community. Road safety. Divisionally, we follow a national programme of road safety events to promote safety and target specific offences. Locally, we utilise trained officers to tackle local issues such as speeding and congestion outside schools. We are also supported by the divisional road policing officers who are the experts in this field. Over the last 12 months, our community policing teams have run several road safety days of action at various schools throughout East Kilbride and Straven. These inputs consisted of both education for students and teachers, but also a degree of enforcement amongst the parents. Also, a road policing action plan took place in the month of June in East Kilbride and Straven, making best use of ANPR technology, automated number plate readers. Over 50 vehicles were stopped, with various offences identified, including the recovery of a stolen van from the Glasgow area. We also ran Operation Close Pass for a week during the month of March and also in July in East Kilbride. The purpose of this operation is to highlight to drivers the importance of leaving enough space when passing a cyclist on the road. With the assistance of local officers, the Road Policing Department carried out the operation on several of the major arterial routes throughout the town. A high proportion of drivers failed the exercise before being stopped and educated by the police. Any questions?
Thanks very much for that, Sergeant Docherty. Can I maybe mention 2 things and then I'll bring the other members in? You mentioned you apprehended several use with knives in your report, and it's always a concern if there's knives involved, but is it a particularly high level? No. Okay.
Here we go now. So that was part of our Easter action plan involving the quad bikes. We were able to reach areas that we couldn't have reached easily before, like Calder Park, etc., and open spaces in more rural areas. Areas where kids gather frequently, where we get reports of antisocial behaviour, drinking, etc. And there were a number of weapons seized during that action plan and also the summer action plan as well. Wasn't in particular always knives. A number of offensive weapons seized, so it can be knives, it can be other things that kids will use to possibly assault others or get into trouble. There's no one particular weapon of choice, I wouldn't say, among the local kids. For most of them, thankfully, these weapons aren't being used, especially at younger ages. They're just carrying them about with them, being a bit silly, maybe wanting their own protection type things. But there's no particular trend to the weapons that are being seized in East Kilbride at this time.
Thanks for that. And a very detailed report. I'll maybe just mention one other thing, and I've no doubt you get this all the time. I had occasion at 4 o'clock one day to phone the police because of street drinkers. And the machine told me I'd need to wait 25 minutes to get through. And there's all these wee kids all playing with these 2 idiots who had a huge carry out. So I took it upon myself just to go out and chin them. And as soon as they seen me coming, they're off. But that concerns me, how the general public, I was the same. I was like, you're kidding. Put the phone down. Could you just comment on that? Is that quite a common occurrence that you're aware of?
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. In relation to that, it is something that comes up. So firstly, our Contact Command and Control Division take all of our calls, both 999 and 101. As you can imagine, our 999 calls take priority. So if we are experiencing a high volume of 999s, then they will seek priority, and the 101s, unfortunately, will take that bit longer to respond to. I have in front of me data from June, which indicates that 72% of our 999s were answered within 10 seconds. So the response times for our 999s is very, very good in comparison to the rest of the United Kingdom. The knock-on effect, unfortunately, is that the 101s then tend to take that bit longer. But rest assured, the calls are prioritised as they're coming in. There is some challenges at the moment round about 999 as well, and I'm not sure if members are aware, following a recent Android update. So those of you who have the Android phones, not the iPhones, there's a functionality following a recent upgrade where if the side of the phone is pressed simultaneously 5 times, it will automatically connect to 999. That has having a knock-on effect ourselves. We're working with partners to try and resolve that matter, but that impact that then has on our answering facilities is hugely challenging. But rest assured, we are working with partners to try and resolve that issue in itself, and obviously ensure that we are prioritising our calls.
Kirsten. Yeah.
I can't hear. Will I just carry on? Okay, thanks. Thanks for all the report and for all the work you're doing in our communities as well. Just wanted to ask a wee bit more about the moving the goalposts scheme. Are there any detailed evaluation about how that had an impact on crime or on the young people themselves in their lives, and any plans to continue it? I don't know if it's specific one-off funding or if it's a ongoing thing in partnership. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Inspector McGovern or something?
So remove the goalposts. It's a great initiative. Move the goalposts. It takes part right across South Lanarkshire. It's a separate entity on its own. Move the goalposts. We work in partnership with them. So do local housing, some other partners in the area as well. I don't have specific figures for Move the Goalposts or how many kids attended or what impact that had in the surrounding area, etc. But I'm sure the Move the Goalposts organisation probably would have. They would have the amount of kids attended, funding, etc. So if Councillor Rob leaves that with me, I could get that report for her and get it forwarded on to her.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. David.
Yeah, first of all, to thank you both and your officers for your responses and your support when I have reason to contact you. It's helpful to have the contacts and get responses, and for the few times that I do have to contact Police Scotland. I think my question follows on from probably some of the correspondence we've had is about traffic, and when is it going to be illegal to, or will you be able to take enforcement action against cars, vans and lorries that bump up and park in pavements and block them? I think that is probably one of the biggest issues that I have with policing. Luckily, the area has been quiet in other ways, but get quite a bit of complaint about the lorries and cars parking up on pavements, and it's not accessible then for prams, buggies and wheelchairs to get past. So, and I know you've dealt with that sort of in an informal way in some cases, but my understanding there's legislation either in or about to come in that will allow you to take further action. But just can you give us a wee bit on that? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware of obviously the correspondence that you have sent into ourselves of late, and obviously we have acted upon it quite rightly, as you've alluded to. Clearly, in terms of call prioritisation, we ultimately respond to matters as and when they're occurring. Often we will attend and the vehicle has since moved on and is no longer parked there. When that does occur, if we've got some information to suggest that it was previously parked there, then we'll do just as you alluded to there. We'll contact the registered keeper and make motions that they no longer park at that location to try and negate it. When there is a sufficiency in terms of legislation and evidence there for us to take enforcement action, then we will duly do so. And ultimately, all we can continue to do is monitor each report on a case-by-case basis, as we have been doing so. So if there is a specific issue, then we will act upon it where we can. Clearly, there's currently legislation in place where a vehicle is causing an obstruction, and that is ultimately what we will base our opinion on at this present moment in time. Should legislation change, which gives us additional powers, then we will treat that accordingly.
Thanks for that. Joe Fagan.
Hi there. I want to come back to road safety. I know it's an issue that I've raised before. It's an issue raised again with me last night. And it's not so much around our residential roads, where I have to say I've seen the benefit of some of that proactive activity and very well publicised activity undertaken by the community police. For me, I remain quite concerned about the trunk roads, the Kingsway and the Queensway through East Kilbride. I know there was another very serious accident a few weeks ago. I don't think there were any fatalities arising from that one, but it was nonetheless a very serious accident, and it meant a road closure into the next day. I know there has been activity at various points, probably led by on the road policing side. I think it would be useful to get some feedback to the committee and to the various parts of the community who'd raised concerns, really to demonstrate that additional action has been taken, and then to help us consider what further action might be required. I know, for example, that there had been in the past efforts to disrupt where they thought races were organised. I've seen and I've spoken to officers in the kind of the high performance vehicles who were monitoring those roads at different points. The issue for me is that whether it is organised or whether it is informal or whether it is just down to like bad driver behaviour at different points throughout the day, I do think we have a problem, and it's certainly a very hazardous part of the town on the Kingsway and the Queensway. I'm not particularly reassured from some of the correspondence I've received back from Transport Scotland that once an accident has taken place, we are properly and fully evaluating what more can be done to prevent accidents. And so really what I'm kind of stressing here is I think there is scope for a further conversation about what further intervention might be required. And I'm really just curious to see if there's any feedback from either yourselves or from your road policing colleagues as to what we can do to just prevent that kind of bad behaviour, and particularly the racing and the high speeds that people are travelling at deliberately on the Kingsway and the Queensway. And the kind of tangent that comes from that is that if it's not the speed itself that is prompting the concerns that I receive, that these roads aren't just run through my ward, if it's not the speed itself or the racing itself and the driver behaviour itself that's causing concerns, I certainly get a lot of complaints about the noise that's sometimes from vehicles that are designed to make a lot of noise, but I certainly get a lot of noise complaints as well from the Kingsway and the Queensway. So I'm just curious to see what kind of further action has been taken.
No, thanks for your comments, Councillor Fagan. Obviously, Inspector Docherty alluded to the fact of the new local policing plan 23-26. Part of that, safeguarding our citizens, we have road safety. I have responsibility, myself personally now, for road safety across the whole of Lanarkshire, not just within South and not just within the Kilbride locality. Quarterly, I meet with the colleagues from Transport Scotland and from roads within South Lanarkshire Council, and we look at various methods in terms of prevention, enforcement, other methods that we can adopt. I'm acutely aware of the issues that we see on the A725 and the A726. I work closely with my colleague Neil Crozier, the Inspector, who has responsibility over our Divisional Roads Policing Unit, so he performs part of the national team. I meet frequently with Neil. We look and we forward plan our programme of activity in terms of road safety forthcoming. And that takes the various guises in terms of the education and enforcement. Now, the A725 and the A726 has caused some challenges of late, which has led to a variety of meetings that I not personally have been involved in, but Police Scotland have been involved in at a national level, seeking to review and look to see what we can do to try and improve those specific stretches of roads. There is a meeting later this month on that particular issue where Transport Scotland are attending, and I will link back in with yourself, Councillor Fagan, in relation to that, because I'm aware of the various residents within your area that's made contact with yourself and other members, also including our MSPs and MPs as well, who oversee those areas. So I'm aware of the community concerns around it, and I rest assured both myself on behalf of Police Scotland as well as other colleagues within Police Scotland are working in tandem with partners, and I'm quite happy to speak with you after this meeting and update you on that.
Thanks for that. Okay, we move on to Elise Frame, please.
Hi, thanks everyone. It's just a quick question. It's regarding the road going into Straven Academy. Now, this gets brought up at every parent council meeting, and it's been brought up in several community councils recently. And the issues regarding the road going into Straven Academy, the traffic going in, there's not been any major incidents reported, but that's not to say that that's not going to happen, because it's an accident waiting to happen. The buses are going in, the buses can't come out, cars are going in having to reverse out to the main road. It's to see if we can have some police patrol here just to observe that, please. Thank you.
Hi, Councillor. Thanks very much for your comments there. Yes, absolutely. And the issues you describe there, I think we could probably describe around most schools in Lanarkshire. I stay in Glasgow and I take my kids to school some mornings, and the behaviour and the parking and the manoeuvres by some other parents are a lot to be desired. And I myself messaged my community policing in my area and asked them to pay attention to the school my kids go to. It's a modern day problem. It absolutely is. A lot of it's geographical. When those schools were built and the locations were built and the roads that lead up to them, when that was all put in place and designed, we simply didn't have the volume of cars we had. Far more parents walked their kids to school and dropped them off and then walked away again. But I'll certainly have a look at Straven Academy again and make sure there's some attention paid to that over the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anybody else? No. Okay, I'll let you escape now. So thank you very much for coming along, giving your presentation, which was very informative. And we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, I'll just pause the meeting for a minute or so to let the gentleman leave. Item 5, Community Partnership Board Update. We have Jen Kerr here today with our colleague James Jen's the Community Engagement Manager, and would you like to address the meeting? Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm Jen Kerr. I'm the new-ish Community Engagement Manager. I replaced Rhonda Leith, who you may have been familiar with, and I joined South Lanarkshire Council in June. So while we present this paper today, I have brought James, who's actually been involved in the work, to answer most of your questions this afternoon. So thank you for the request for information on neighbourhood planning and community planning work that is taking place in the East Kilbride area. This paper introduces the area committee to the community partnership boards, which are a vehicle of the community planning partnership itself. We want to highlight that the community partnerships are a coming together of a range of stakeholder groups across the whole of the East Kilbride locality. So while we're also undertaking neighbourhood planning in particular neighbourhoods where we'll have stakeholder groups, or there might be other neighbourhoods where there's already some community groups that are networked and working together, these community partnership boards are where we bring all of that together for all of the localities. There are 4 of them across South Lanarkshire. There's one in Rutherglen and Cambuslang, one in Clydesdale, one for East Kilbride, and there will be one for Hamilton. They are very new. They've been in development for about a year, and James has joined us actually on secondment from another council to help us to develop those in this area. And his role is funded by the Community Planning Partnership, not just the council. While he sits in a council team, he works very much on behalf of all partners in the Community Planning Partnership. So the partnerships themselves are entirely community-led. Our role, James's role, is to clerk them, to bring them together, to help them with policy to support, to help them identify and make use of resources, and also to make connections back to the various partners once they've agreed their priorities and who they'd like to work with. So if they wanted to speak to the police, James would be like, right, I know how to speak to them, I know who they are, we'll get them in. And likewise to make connections into yourselves as elected members. I'm sure you're already probably quite connected into most of the groups, the community councils, the community development trusts, the community groups that are forming these partnerships anyways. So however, if you'd like us to broker sort of a formality between the area committee and the partnership, we're more than happy to. If you'd like, their chair is a community member, it's not a council officer, we can take back to them any requests to either provide minutes or come and do their own updates and their own presentations to the area committees as they develop. So just here today, we're here to introduce them, tell you a bit about what they've been up to. And this one in particular is just in development. It had its first meeting just in June there. So there's not a lot to report yet. We can tell you a bit about what some of the other ones that have been here a year or longer. Just so you can get a sense of where it may develop. So the community partnerships, they bring together many local neighbourhood groups, partnerships and organisations in the locality area. Each one of them will choose a chair, a community member, who will then have a seat at the community planning board and be a representative of their community groups and organisations and community development in that area. And while we help them write the reports, they present them. So we've only had officers presenting community partnership reports on the odd occasion that their member or their chair was unable to attend. Section 5 of the report outlines a little bit about how they kind of operate. The partnership sees them very much as a partner, not a stakeholder in community planning. So this is us involving communities as a partner, one of the many partners alongside the public bodies in community planning. They have a fund called the Lived Experience Fund that is provided to them by the Community Partnership Board. And this is to help them understand the totality of their area. So again, because this partnership is quite new, it's met once. Part of its developmental work will be to develop its own community engagement. So rather than having officers going out and saying, what do you think about ideas we've come up with earlier in our relevant public services, we're asking and resourcing community partners to go out and ask their own neighbours what they think and making sure that they understand who their neighbours are and that they're asking all of them, the young people, the older people, the families, people they maybe wouldn't speak to or who wouldn't maybe participate in community activity. So it's kind of our way to support communities to really understand the range of issues when they bring them in so that they're more representative and inclusive. Alongside that, some of our support through James's role is to help map out who lives in their community, help them understand the range of groups and connections that they could be making. And in East Kilbride in particular, it's one of the areas where there hasn't been a lot of community development work done over the years. There hasn't been a really sort of noted effort to develop things forward in a planned kind of way amongst partners. So for us, it's about getting the time to get to know people, make sure we have all those connections. What we have found, there's an awful lot of work going on in the community, a lot of really great work. It's just maybe not been kind of brought together yet. So Section 5 outlines what their interest areas are so far. They haven't sort of started to look at their priorities. Other ones like Clydesdale, for example, transport's a really big priority for them. So we've been bringing in the planning officers to work very specifically around some of those issues with them. And we will be holding a development session for the majority of these partnerships, because Hamilton hasn't started yet, in October, where they'll further get to meet the other ones like Brother Glen, who've been around for a while, actually. And are very independent, very empowered, feel they're having the influence they'd like, have the connections with members and services that they want to have to take forward the differences. And what we hope is that all partners will see these partnership boards as a kind of liaison point with community activists and community volunteers, and that they can organize themselves in a way that they can quite cohesively engage with a range of partners in one space. So there aren't 700 sets of meetings to go to talk about the same thing over and over and over again, and that they understand, where they can go to if they're not getting the influence they want, how to work with their elected members, etc. So we see them as a useful and empowered tool for everyone in the future. But a part of that capacity development is just helping them understand who we all are and how we work in their community, how many partners are actually in their community working on a daily basis. That kind of information is a big part of their ability to engage with us in the way we work. So we will be starting at a very local neighborhood level through the community planning partnership as well, some neighborhood planning. So neighborhood planning happens in areas of significant deprivation only. So while we have all of the locality, we will be working very specifically in White Hills and I think a bit of Green Hill, and then some other areas, neighborhoods that education has helped us to identify that have increasingly hidden pockets of child poverty, deprivation, probably due to kind of the middle classness of some of the neighborhoods and the cost of living increases that are affecting mortgages and debts and borrowing. We're starting to see an increase in uptake of children's benefits a lot, significantly quickly in East Kilbride, and not from neighborhoods you would expect it from. So we're looking into that as part of our planning process. In the areas that we will be really focused on to support communities to come together to develop their own plan, we'll be chapping every door in that neighborhood in October and maybe into November even, so that we're making sure people are at least aware of what's going on and can start to get involved in it. Like I said, it's a new way of working in that area. We've not really ever chapped doors there before. Our first meeting wasn't particularly well attended by community members, and we hope to improve that as we go. So just to be clear, that neighbourhood planning, although it's also community planning, it's part of our statutory duty that as the council, we're one of 5 partners that have that duty to put together plans with communities that have stubborn inequalities, ones that, high SIMD levels that consistently have been like that. So there are 1 or 2 neighbourhoods in East Kilbride that we will be working into that. But like I was saying, we're starting to see more and more inequality seep into some other neighbourhoods we wouldn't have maybe looked at before. So we'll probably have a sort of youth approach and a children's poverty approach in one part of it and an actual neighbourhood plan in the others. So if elected members tend to get quite involved in the stakeholder groups as those develop in other areas where we've got more of the neighbourhood plans. This is our first sort of venture into East Kilbride. So I know a few of you were at the first meeting that was a few weeks ago that James was at. So thank you for your support, and we would thank you in advance for your continued support to draw other people into those neighbourhoods that you're aware of. The other, the last section on the paper, I should add, we will be undertaking some participatory budgeting in the area as a way to kind of catalyse groups to come forward and start to get involved. We always find if we've got ideas that people want to move forward, giving them some input and some funds to get going and ones that they can vote on really gets people out, it gets people in, it creates a bit of fun competition. And so participatory budgeting is a tool for small projects to get going in a community, can be a really effective way of starting to get people to notice interest. And also it says a bit of commitment, there's a bit of resource going into this. It's not just lip service, it's not just chat, it's not just a strategic document that sits on a shelf, that we actually mean this. We want people to do things for themselves where they can, and we'll support that financially as well as in practice. So Section 6 is also another fund that's available to communities that runs through our community engagement team, and it's the Can Do Fund. It's some of the investment funds monies that were approved, I think, last year. So just to make you aware that that's now been launched. Can Do funds are equal to the pot of participatory budgeting funds that were also approved at the same time, and they're available to non-neighbourhood planning areas. So participatory budgeting is only available to the areas of deprivation where we're doing neighbourhood plannings. other areas can apply on a grant basis to the Can Do Community Fund. So there's some parity of access to funds for people to across the whole of the locality to take forward things that they'd like to. That fund and the applications for it will come here to the committee for approval for the Can Do funds. Just so you're aware, when it comes through, it's another form of grant. And it started, we just opened it at the beginning of the month and started to promote it. But you will oversee those applications and the approvals of those. So we just wanted to let you know that that was open and to expect some grants, hopefully coming through fairly soon, requests. So in conclusion, the partnerships are forming and the Community Partnership Board, we're about to start some neighbourhood planning in White Hills, possibly bits of Green Hill, depends on how those communities feel they want to put boundaries around the areas that we work in. Our first meeting, it was officer heavy, partner heavy. We'd like to change that. We know we have a lot of work to do, knocking on doors, getting people involved, getting people out and understanding the sort of voluntary community of East Kilbride. We're working with all of our partners to try to do that better, and we would welcome your support and help in that. I'm happy to take questions or comments, and like I said, probably most of them will go to James. I'm going to pull the new person on that one. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that. Questions? John Anderson.
Probably more a comment, but maybe a question as well. You said you're struggling there to get people to take part in these events, and I'm not really surprised at that. If you look at 4.6, a neighbourhood plan in 2021 was developed by the Westwood community. Their second priority, they agreed, was more facilities, community facilities in the area. At the last housing committee, they took a decision to close the Red Deer Bowling Club, the Red Deer Centre and the community centre, leaving Westwood with absolutely no facilities at all for them to attend during the day. So when people see that, and the people that was involved in developing this plan weren't even consulted about these closures. So how are you going to persuade people to come out, spend their time working hard and developing a plan, a neighbourhood plan for a committee in here just to turn around and say, well, you know what, rather than giving you the extra facilities you're asking for as your priority, we're actually taking away all your facilities. And I don't blame people for not taking part in it. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Councillor. I don't know if there's an expectation that all facilities will be provided by public services. So some of that could be around asset transfers and some of it could be around supporting capacity to do that. If there's been commitments made that haven't been followed through, absolutely, I take your point on. I think some of the dependencies we create on public services and then not following through on being able to do that creates a huge amount of apathy in communities, and that's where sometimes when we start working in a community, we need to understand why people aren't showing up. Is it because of stuff like that? Do we need to really focus on changing around a problem, or at least unload the baggage for a while of what happened in the past? Something could sometimes have happened 10 years ago like that, and it's never been forgotten. But what we started to see in Rutherglen, which was similar, we had, and it was involved housing as well. I shouldn't say that. It was a particular area that was just a problem for people, and they wanted to take it over and do something about it, and they did. And the difference it made was incredible. And that started to build and build and build and build. They got a bin out of bin services a couple of weeks ago. They got to keep it, and they don't have to hide it. That's magic. That wouldn't have been allowed. That wouldn't have happened a while ago. So it does take time, and it does take a growing sense of a few people taking action. And again, one of the things these documents, the neighbourhood plans, they are statutory documents under the Community Empowerment Act, where we've all committed to making these commitments with communities. So we have a role, I think, is in the team to start to raise their importance across our own services as well as other partners. So if that was a GP practice commitment or a commitment on behaviour and crime in an area, there's other partners that also we've made these commitments. We need to adhere to them. We have quite a few of these plans. They don't have a high visibility in all areas. I wasn't aware, for example, that was the case for that one. So I will take that up, and we'll take that back to our stakeholder group to look at the impact that decision's had and what we could do about more facilities in a different way. That if we can't provide them as the council, are there other alternatives, other things to look at? Yeah, I take your point though, and that's what community planning is meant to be. It's about the range of partners trying to understand our collective impacts, good or bad, in a community. We're not great at that as partners yet. We're working on it. We've actually had a meeting, City meal today, to have a meeting very specifically, and we want maybe East Kilbride to be one of our areas where we unpick our system and we unpick the bits and promises we made and where those decisions get made. And if the health board's making a decision that actually makes it worse for the police, or we close down a youth club and then the police have more work to do, that's just transferring resources around the system rather than fixing the problem. So we kind of understand those interdependencies, but we don't see how they work in practice in our communities. So I will take back that point to on the closure of facilities, make sure that it's being discussed at our meeting with that group of people and ask them how they'd like to take that forward, and we could maybe support them with a range of other options, or to make complaints to those committees if they wish to through their members. That's the kind of, they have levers available to them as members of the community, and we want to make sure they know how to use those if they're not being asked for further input.
Okay, thanks for that. Kirsten.
Thanks for the report. Can I ask a wee bit more about section 4.8? What is the consultation that is mentioned? What's the aim of it? Is it to produce a neighbourhood plan, or is it to identify community priorities, or a bit of both? And which neighbourhoods, can you keep local members in the loop about which neighbourhoods those consultations may be working in? And if there's anything councillors can do to help get the word out, that would be great. And the second question is a wee bit about the Can Do Community Fund. Given the timescales involved, I think at the end of January is the closing date. What sort of evidence is needed about that?
She must have lost connection. I'll give her a wee second, see if she's back on again. Okay, we'll come back to Kirsten if she gets back on again. Joe.
Thanks. I suppose I can just pick myself up, having been knocked over under the weight of John Anderson's hypocrisy. I would just like maybe come back to the issue of the asset review in that particular board, and actually where these planning and consultation exercises are going to become really quite important. I think we know from other localities kind of what works and what doesn't, but the localities themselves are different. And this really is, I think, an emerging kind of activity in East Kilbride. And my advice really would be to look at some of the other localities where this is a bit more established to see what lessons we can learn. However, one of the lessons that I would take is that, well, we can plan and engage with the community as much as we want to, and determine what the community's preferences are, and engage with the councillors to establish what our preferences are and what our democratic will is. Anything that we put forward to the community will have to be funded. And I think that's the big challenging conversation we're going to have, because the reality is we are dealing now with the twin terrors of rampant inflation and pretty appalling and disgusting and socially harmful underfunding of local government chronically at the hands of an inept Scottish government. So the result of that is that we have to engage honestly with the community about what their expectations are and how we manage their expectations, and how we follow up the conversation about what the preferences and wishes with the community are with what is actually realistic and what is possible. And perhaps one point of clarity, my understanding is that the next steps agreed by the Housing Committee were actually to have further discussions with the people who were affected, and that is not entirely accurate what the amendment that was defeated at the committee was setting out and what has been reiterated today.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. Okay, can I bring Kirsten Robb back in again, please?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure. Will I just say it all again? I don't know how much was cut off.
Off you go.
Okay, sorry about that. So under 4.8, it was to ask a wee bit more about what is the aim of the consultation. Are we aiming to produce neighbourhood plans in those areas? And will you inform local members if there's consultations happening in their areas, and if there's anything we can do to help and get the word out and encourage people to take part? So that's the first question. The second one is, given the timescales of the Can Do Community Fund to the end of January, and where we're at with East Kilbride capacity building and so on, what evidence is needed to fulfil the requirement of for the community fund to show that that's a project needed by the community?
Okay, thanks. I'll answer the 4.8 question first. So that is a neighbourhood planning exercise that will only be conducted in the area of White Hills, and I believe it's called Green Hill, possibly. So we've determined where the areas of deprivation are using our data, and now we're going to go out. We'll go out and speak to the community and ask them if that's the case and how they'd like to define the area. If it happens to cut across a boundary, an administrative boundary of Woolward or something that we use, we will go with what that community feels they want to do. So that is very specifically a neighbourhood planning exercise. It did take place, that meeting. That was a meeting where we only had a few community members come to. So we know that we need to do a lot more work there. We will be chapping doors in those neighbourhoods in October. We are making plans to do that. And we will chap every door 3 times. So if they don't answer after the 3rd time, then we don't go back, because they clearly don't want to speak to us, but we will go back 3 times and try again at different times a day. So those areas are the areas that we'll be doing neighbourhood planning in. But like I said, we also recognize that there's this, in the other areas that aren't as deprived, we have like 33% child poverty rates based on the data that we collect to inform child poverty. It doesn't match the rest of the SIMD. Those all look fairly green and in the middle, but people are claiming an awful lot of support for children, and we need to know why. So we will be doing some work there with education. It won't probably be linked to the neighbourhood plans, but we very much will be doing, and the types of interventions we put into those households and those that part of the community may be different. It may be about increasing earnings, family employability, skills development, rather than supporting people who are so far away from the labour market and we're looking at maximising income through benefits. So we expect to find a very different situation in those communities than in the ones in 4.8. So the mapping exercise has started and it's already been raised to our attention. We've missed some people off of it. So yes, please, the help would be, if anyone's complaining that they're not involved or we don't know about them, let us know. Absolutely everyone that wants to be involved in this is welcome, including elected members. So if we'll make sure that you should have all been invited to that first stakeholder group from, I think, is it the communities team when it comes through the email, James? Yeah. So it'll come through communities at South Lanarkshire. That's the email address we use to communicate. So keep an eye on emails like that, because sometimes we send information out. So make sure you notice if there's a stakeholder group, that's a neighbourhood planning group. And like I said, we're engaging with our experts in education and family services to support the work with children and to families, and to do that in a really sensitive way. In regards to the Can Do Fund question, that evidence of need is just simply that you've spoken to the community that the funding application affects. So if you want to run a youth club, that you've talked to young people in the area and they said that they want a youth club, or that there's evidence of need around youth crime in an area where a youth club would be a nice diversion. So that's the requirement of evidence for that fund. So it basically not to fund something that's not needed. That is the wish of a couple of people. And with participatory budgeting, you kind of know based on the amount of votes, that's an engagement exercise in itself. But with the Can Do Fund, if you've just got one person with an idea and they put it in and they haven't spoke to anyone, nobody actually wants to do it, and we've given them £1,000, that could have gone to another project that wanted to. So that's why we've asked for the evidence. But also to get the idea out there that community activist participation, people need to work with people. It's not up to us to really decide. It's up to that community to decide. And if no one actually needs it after they do their evidence, then we usually find people will change their ideas or not ask for the money if they don't need it. If I could also comment on Councillor Fagan's point about honest, I agree completely. I think there's no benefit whatsoever in making promises we can't keep. And I think, like what I was saying earlier, is about, well, it doesn't necessarily say those buildings are going to be paid for by the public purse. There could be other options in there. And I think that sense of facilities and what's needed, again, is around good engagement, but also about helping communities as a capacity thoroughly understand the situation, the financial situation that we're in. If they think we're hiding money or we've got money and we're just not giving it out to them, that's not acceptable. We really have to honestly support education and informing of how budgets work, how decisions are made, how much money there is, how much money there isn't, to allow the public to engage in that conversation with you all, either through committee or otherwise, in a fair way. Otherwise, you'll get lots of accusations, I'm sure, as elected members about what you're really doing with all the money or where it's really gone or mismanagement. And I've seen and heard lots of it. But once you start to inform people of participatory budgeting, once they start to understand that some communities need things more than they do, they're happy to make those decisions. We're not comfortable thinking even, oh, they need it more, give it to them. Or if it's a choice between the school and the kids or having a new building, give it to the kids. When people generally are good and kind and they want to be helpful and they prioritize others' vulnerability when it comes to decision making, there's a lot of evidence to back that up. But if we're not helping them understand that evidence and how it affects their own community, we will continue to see a kind of a defensive need to protect themselves when actually that's not people's human nature. It really isn't.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, I don't have any other speakers. So thank you very much for your, and I look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Thank you. Right, one more item to deal with before we finish. Community grant applications. We've got 6 applications. Does the committee agree with the recommendations in the report, which you've all read? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have no other urgent business. Well, once again, thank you for your attendance.